and a lot of you probably live in the issue queue. So let's see. My name is eelkeblok. I am a senior Drupal developer at IO Campus Utrecht. You can find out everything about IO at iodigital.com, and you can find me just about anywhere as eelkeblok, on Twitter at eelkeblok, and on Drupal.org as well, GitHub, etc. I have about 13 years of Drupal experience. So let's get started because we don't have a ton of time. What are we going to look at? What are issues and what is the issue queue? We're going to have a look at what issue statuses are there and what priorities mean. We're going to have a look at the Gitlab workflow, how to work with merge requests, a new way of making changes to code in Drupal. And lastly, we're going to have a look at patches. So what's an issue? Any change to Drupal or a contributed project is described in an issue. There are several types of issues. Bugs, features, tasks, plans, and support requests. And you may be familiar with the term tickets. If you're working with a system like Jira or something, it's basically the same thing. So what's the issue queue? Drupal core has one, each contributed project has one. There's actually, I like to refer to it as the fire hose, project/issues at Drupal.org. That's all issues on Drupal.org for any project there. More practical is if you stick / and then the project name behind that, you get the issues for a particular project. Another good one is the Your Issues tab in your profile on Drupal.org. Any project page will have like this summary block on the right for its issue queue. There's a search box there, some links for pre-filtered view. And if you click on one, then you'll see something like this. Not this specifically, because this is the issue queue for core while we were on the meta tag project page. Right, first, if you start working in the issue queue and you plan to go and solve some things, make sure that if your company is listed on Drupal.org, also tie your profile to your company, so that not only you gets credit for the work that you do, but also your company. How do you do that real quick? You go to your dashboard, your account on Drupal.org after you log in. You go to your profile, you go to edit, and then if you scroll all the way down, you'll find this set of vertical tabs, and that's where you can fill in your company. It's an autocomplete, and like I said, your company needs to be listed on Drupal.org. Why is this useful? There is a marketplace listing for companies on Drupal.org, and the order there is also determined by how much issue credit your company has accumulated. So let's have a look at issue types. First of all, support requests. You could open a support request when you're having trouble with Drupal or a module, although what I think is also quite common is that you submit a bug or a feature request, and then somebody comes along who says, well, actually it already does this, or it works as designed, and they might change the type to support request. To be honest, if you really need support, I think there's better ways than to open an issue in the issue queue. Your favorite search engine, obviously. There's a Drupal dedicated Stack Exchange that you might actually end up when you use your search engine. Slack is also a good one. The URL that you see there has instructions on how to get on the Drupal Slack. And then IRC is also still around if you prefer that. Bugs, we don't need to really dwell on this, I guess. Most people have a common understanding of what a bug is. Functional error in the system. I've listed some examples. Pretty well understood, I think. Same goes for feature requests. Anything completely new. new module, new subsystem, or from really big to really small, just adding some option in an administration form, or maybe even removing something if it's no longer needed. Tasks, neither a bug nor a feature, but it still needs to be done. Can be submitted as a task. Again, some examples. Refactoring code, adding automated tests could all be added as a task. And then plans. Those are the maybe least well understood. If you're familiar with something like Jira, you might also be familiar with epics. This is similar. Something that will probably need many more issues than a single one to complete. Would all be added to a plan. So you have a plan for the whole thing, and then it might have several child issues to get the whole thing done. And those child issues will also be tied to the parent issue with the parent issue relationship field. Issue priorities. Also, you can probably you have a feel of what they mean, but there's actually some pretty strict guidelines on what they mean for the Drupal project. You can read that at the URL that you see on the screen. For example, if there's any critical issues left for a major Drupal version, that major Drupal version will not be released. So it is quite important to have these right. Similarly, there's also guidelines when an issue can be made critical. Specific guidelines for bugs, tasks, and for feature requests, it's basically rarely, unless a maintainer decides that it is so important that it is marked critical, but that doesn't happen that often. Same again for major, also some guidelines when bugs, tasks, or features might be major. And then obviously for features that is more common because, well, there basically are more important and less important features. Issue statuses. These are probably what you need to deal with most often when you're in the issue queue. I've created this flowchart. Any issue starts out as active. When you create a new one, it's active. Then when there's some changes made, you can move it to needs review as an indication that you need some input from other members of the community. They might move it to RTBC, but that's highly unlikely. Usually it will go to needs work because you forgot something or it needs some other change or whatever, or somebody disagrees, or usually issues go many times back and forth between needs review and needs work. You do need to set those statuses yourself, except for one condition, which is when you put it to needs review and there's automatic tests. Those tests fail, then actually the system will put it back to needs work. And then finally, if several people agree, several people have reviewed and have actually said, okay, looks good to me. All previous points have been addressed. Then somebody might decide to put it to reviewed and tested by the community, or RTBC, as you'll see it referred to. And then when a maintainer comes along, they might finally set the status to fixed when it's merged. Not to closed, by the way, because fixed will get updated eventually after 2 weeks to closed by the system. The idea behind this that is that fixed issues will still show up in the issue queue for some time. Okay, and then there's that mysterious little asterisk there at the closed status. because it's actually a status with a multiple personality disorder. There's not one, there's actually 6 of them. Most are fairly self-explanatory. Duplicate, there's another one that, another issue that's basically the same. Cannot reproduce the system, or sorry, the issue cannot be reproduced by anyone. They can't find what is, or can't actually see it for themselves. Closed, outdated. The issue is no longer relevant, basically. Something changed, which makes it outdated. And then closed fix, like I mentioned, that's the one that you basically should not put an issue to by yourself. It will be done so by the system after it's been fixed for a while. Right. Moving on to creating issues. And when you are going to think about creating issues, actually, you first need to know when not to create an issue. The URL has a good article. It's pretty old, but still quite relevant. I think these presentations will actually become available online. I'll try to get this somewhere shared as well, so that you don't need to write down the URLs. Basically, it's a summary of that article. There's a few steps that you should take before actually creating an issue. And one of them is you can try the latest code, the development version. The issue might actually have already been solved. You should obviously check the issue queue for existing issues. Do a search for terms that somebody else might use, that you would use to describe the issue. Many times you'll actually find something then. And also make sure to run updates. The update.php script in the Drupal install or drush updb, because there's a surprisingly number of issues that's actually caused by not having run updates properly. And then when all else fails and you can't find any issues and it's not solved in the latest code, etc., then you could move on to create an issue. There's one issue per issue. It's a bit silly, of course. You probably understand what I mean. Describe one problem per ticket. Don't put a list of all the problems that you found with a particular module in your customer project. But make sure that you go through the previous checklist for each and every one of them, and then you might still be left with 1 or 2, and then you create actually 1 or 2 issues in the issue queue for that. Make sure your title is descriptive. Give enough information, not too much, obviously. Sometimes you see really long issues, but usually the problem is that there is not enough information. Add steps to reproduce, also quite important. Make sure that somebody can actually witness the issue for themselves to be able to understand it and to be able to fix it. And use the issue template. You can find that again on the URL, although nowadays, usually when you start creating an issue, it's already pre-filled, which is very helpful, very nice. And if you follow these headings and if you fill them out properly, then you actually make a pretty good issue already. For example, the second item, steps to reproduce, so that you can't actually forget to add those. There's a bunch of headings below at the bottom. User interface changes, API changes, data model changes. It's pretty common for an issue to not have all of them relevant, so you can just put none. Usually there's only user interface changes or only API changes. Sometimes both, of course. But don't hesitate to put none if it's not relevant. Right. Merge requests. Really happy with this. Welcome to the 21st century Drupal style. First of all, you always start with a clone of the project. If you want to work on a project, obviously you'll need a Git clone of it. If you do this within a Drupal install, you can actually also test it, which is helpful, obviously. How to get a clone is by going to the project page, going to the version control tab, and there you'll find some commands that you can use to clone the particular project. And then when you actually start working on a particular issue, you will want an issue fork. Basically, that means a copy of the Git repository is created just for this ticket, and it will also create a branch for this for the issue within that fork. Or if somebody else already clicked that button and you do want to push changes, you'll actually need to get push access to the issue fork. You only need that if you want to make changes. If you just want to review and pull the code, you don't need push access, obviously. And then when you either created the issue fork yourself or you requested push access, you'll see something like this. Another good one to have, the show commands link that you see at the right. If you click it, you'll get this bit of information, and this tells you how to actually get the issue fork and the branch locally. It adds a remote first. You issue these commands from within the Git clone that you made earlier. You'll get a remote for the issue fork, and it will fetch the branches that are within that issue fork. If you do that, it'll look something like this. This is where those instructions were copied and pasted into a terminal. You see it first. No, you don't see it adding the actual remote, but you do see it fetching. And you also might notice that the issue fork also has all the branches from the original clone, because obviously it's a fork, so it will have those branches as well. This is a view from my favorite GUI for Git. Great fan of GUIs for Git, because you get the graph. You see exactly what is going on. That's what it looks like there. Then you make some changes. You develop like you would normally. I usually make a lot of commits, atomic commits, changes, small concise little changes get their own commit. And then when you're finished and you are happy with the result, you push it, and then you can open a merge request. And from that point on, people can move to Gitlab for the reviewing. If you click on the link for the merge request, you end up in Gitlab, which will look probably something like this. Notice the sign in button at the top. Usually when I end up in Gitlab, I'm not actually logged in. Luckily, when you click the sign in, there's sort of a single sign-on with Drupal.org going on, and you'll probably be logged in right away. You won't have to put in your username and password again. But do be aware of that, because you might not see the stuff that you want to see, or you're missing stuff, and that might mean you're actually not logged in. Then when you do, you can go to the Changes tab for the merge request, and you can add comments actually per line, which is very useful. You can, before when we do things with patches, you'd have these code snippets within the issue queue, and people would comment on that. This is really helpful to be able to just go into the code and put your comments there. Also good to know that these comments that you put into Gitlab will also be shown in the issue on Drupal.org itself. So even though it won't have the code context, you can actually see that somebody has been submitting comments, and you can go into the merge request itself to see what they were talking about. Right, and then if everybody is happy and the issue is RTBC, maintainers, please merge from Drupal.org itself using this interface. What you get by that is all the changes for the merge request will actually be squashed into a single commit. And you get the proper commit message for free, basically. Right. How much time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay, I need to be quick with this. Working with patches, it's basically the old way of working. You'll still need patches to apply fixes to your own projects. And of course, there's also people who still prefer using patches, so it's useful to have some idea about them. Patches are files that describe changes to other files. There's really no strict policy of what you should be using. If you should be using patches within the issue queue or use merge requests, although merge requests are obviously the future or the new thing. So that's where people will probably be moving. Again, when working with patches, Git is your biggest friend. Do use Git. And when you do create patches for the issue queue, use the naming conventions. And this is the scary URL that you probably don't want to be writing down. But there are naming conventions to name patch files. Some useful Git commands. Like I said, get a clone of the project repo, like you would do with merge requests. You can then create your own branches. You don't need to get them from Drupal.org. You can apply a patch with git apply. Then make sure that you commit the result of that, and you can use a commit message saying something along the lines of I applied the patch file such and such. Make sure that you can actually find out which patch file you used. Then make your changes like before. Commit as you see fit. Make sure that your changes are actually committed. I've seen people making changes and then trying from the diff from the actual commit to what has been changed, make the patch from that, which is possible, but it's very hard to reproduce. And you can also create patches, as the last command shows you. You can create patches from basically any arbitrary set of commits. And the advantage of this is because you also committed that original patch, you can actually also quite easily create interdiff texts. Those are basically also patches, but describing the difference between two patches. Another good one, if you have a merge request that you would actually like to apply to a particular project, you can do so by going to the URL that you see in the screen. It says project number, that should be pull request number, I suppose. If you stick .patch after the URL for a merge request, you actually get a patch for that merge request, as if it were a patch. However, do not put this in your Composer patches if you apply patches through Composer, because if anybody pushes to that merge request, that patch will change. So what you do instead is you save the contents of that screen that you get by applying .patch. You save that locally, that's what you apply, and then you have a stable situation. And you can obviously see if the merge request has changed, what has changed, and maybe update that patch later on. But do not put this URL directly into your project, because things will probably break at some point. All right, that's it. It was sort of a speed run through the issue queue. This talk is usually meant for a little bit more time than half an hour. Is there any questions? Oh, one moment. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Oh. Thanks.
Yes. So question, sometimes I see patches that are open for many years.
Yeah.
How come those are not merged into the code base for that module? Why do they keep those patches for so long?
That's more of a like a social question, I guess, than a technical one. You could actually seek out, for example, on Slack, like before, you could seek out the maintainer of a module, ask about it, what they think about the issue. But usually it's because it's not deemed ready, or maybe it doesn't have the interest of the maintainer or whatever. And yeah, like I said, it's a social thing. You can actually approach whoever was involved with the patch before, or the maintainer of the module, and ask about it. Hey, I'm interested in this. What can we do to move this along? Bottom line probably usually is people wanting to do the actual legwork to get the patch where it needs to be. That's probably most of it. But there's issues that I've seen issues that are 10 years old. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? No? Okay. Thanks a lot for your attention. See you all later. Goodbye. One other, if you are